Welcome to TCCC-Plus Day 2, Module 5, Hypothermia. This covers why hypothermia kills even in warm weather and sustained warming for a long hold. Hypothermia kills in any weather and even indoors on heated floors. It is part of a vicious circle. Bleeding cools the casualty and cold worsens bleeding. And it happens in summer too, because in mostly all cases the ground and air will be cooler than body temperature, and because blood loss makes its own cold, regardless of the temperature outside. Even surgical teams in the Iraq desert saw trauma casualties arrive cold in extreme heat. In civilian medicine, we can see people with burns from lying on heated floors, while hypothermic at the same time. The doctrine is blunt about this. Prevention is far easier than rewarming, so you start preventing heat loss the moment the casualty is hit. You do not wait for shivering. The mechanism of clotting is part of the reason hypothermia sits third in our order. Clotting is a chemical reaction, and it runs slower in the cold, so by the time a casualty is shivering and pale, the plug at the bleeding site is already weaker than it should be. The cost is measurable. In trauma casualties needing massive transfusion, every single degree the core drops below 36 is linked to about 10% more red cells burned through in the first day. Cold blood will not clot, and leaving hypothermia for later undoes the bleeding, breathing, and circulation work you just did. And do not borrow your thresholds from mountain medicine. A trauma casualty is not a healthy hiker. The danger starts far earlier. The trauma scale begins with mild hypothermia at 36 degrees and below, where the wilderness scale does not even call it mild hypothermia until 35, while the trauma scale runs moderate from 34 down and severe below 32. That difference matters because below about 32 degrees, very few trauma casualties survive at any injury severity, and most casualties who do not survive their injuries arrive already below 34. Treat a cold trauma casualty as an emergency a full 2 degrees sooner than civilian medicine says. Here we see the two scales again, because on a long hold, cold is a slow killer. Trauma casualties should already be worried at 36 degrees centigrade or Celsius, not the low 30s. Every degree lost costs you clotting. Keep measuring and keep them warm. It is as much a treatment as any drug. To prevent or treat hypothermia, start with the wet clothing. This because it is the biggest single win. Getting wet clothing off or sealing a vapor barrier over it cuts total heat loss by 20 to over 40%, more than piling blankets on top of soaped fabric ever will. But do not strip a casualty bare for no reason. Cut windows to reach a wound, treat it and recover, rather than exposing everything at once in the wind and rain. Then insulate from the ground, block wind and rain, and cover the head. Put active heat on the torso and on the right part of it, the armpits first, then the chest and back, the places that carry heat to the core. Hand and foot warmers do not warm a core, they only save fingers and toes. The issued kit itself we take on the next slide. 2 safety notes. Heat sources go on a layer, never on bare skin, because cold, shut down skin burns without the casualty feeling it. And room temperature fluids cool a casualty even as you try to warm them, so warm anything you put in and never microwave it because it heats unevenly and will burn them. Now the cold weather reality, and it is the heart of this module. The standard hypothermia kit, a foil cover and a chemical heat blanket, is better than nothing, but on its own, in real cold, it is not enough. Tested against insulated systems in a hard freeze, the bare kit came last, and casualties inside it were cold again within the hour, because it carries no insulation of its own. That is exactly why special operations units add insulation on top of the issued kit. Treat the kit as a starting layer, not the finished job. This is the Banach model, the Nordic layered casualty wrapping system used by Arctic operations units. 3 layers plus an insulating pad reduce the 4 routes of heat loss: conduction, convection, radiation, and evaporation, and support active rewarming. Innermost, a vapor barrier, non-breathable plastic or survival bag against the casualty. A middle insulating layer, sleeping bag, blanket, synthetic puffy, synthetic preferred when wet, and a wind and waterproof outer shell. Add active heat to the torso when available, but never on bare skin. Always keep an insulating pad between casualty and ground and keep the head covered. If the casualty is wet, remove or replace wet clothing if feasible. If not, place the vapor barrier directly against the wet casualty to keep the insulation dry. This is the Banach model, the Nordic layered casualty wrapping system used by Arctic operations units. 3 layers plus an insulating pad reduce the 4 routes of heat loss: conduction, convection, radiation, and evaporation, and support active rewarming. Innermost, a vapor barrier, non-breathable plastic or survival bag against the casualty. A middle insulating layer, sleeping bag, blankets, where synthetic materials are preferred over down when wet. And a wind and waterproof outer shell. Add active heat to the torso when available, but never on bare skin. Always keep an insulating pad between the casualty and the ground and keep the head covered. If the casualty is wet, remove or replace wet clothing if feasible. If not, place the vapor barrier directly against the wet casualty to keep the insulation dry. For a long hold, build a proper enclosure in layers according to the Banach model. Let's repeat that again. Dry the casualty. A vapor barrier next to the body, insulation underneath and over because the ground steals heat by conduction and underneath matters as much as over. If possible, active heat to the torso and put it where it counts. The armpits first, then the chest, then the back. Hand and foot warmers do not do this job. But never directly on skin, it may cause burns, and cold skin is particularly at risk. Head and neck covered with the breathing path clear, and have a wind and waterproof outer layer. Off the ground, out of the weather. Then recheck temperature, shivering, and mental status over time. Where you have a vehicle or a building, add a proper heat source and warm fluids. On foot, you are mostly preventing loss. One safety point regarding why we don't put active heat directly on skin. Cold, under-perfused skin burns easily. The heat source that feels fine on your hand can give a shocked casualty a deep burn they never feel coming. So we never put the heat element straight on bare skin, but keep a thin layer between. Also, do not trap it under the weight of a casualty lying on their back unless you can lift and look. And check the skin for burns each time you reassess. 2 threads tie off here. If you have a tourniquet on a limb, use a limb exclusion wrap. Cover the casualty but leave the tourniquet accessible so you can still see and reassess it. There is a quiet bonus to that because a cool limb with a tourniquet may hold up a little better, as cooling starved muscle buys it some time. But never pack snow or ice straight onto it, which only adds a cold injury on top. And the drugs thread, which we pick up in the pain module, opioids, ketamine, and benzodiazepines all switch off shivering, the casualty's own engine of heat. Give them and you have taken away their heating, so warm them from outside before and after you medicate, never instead. Regarding the reassessment for hypothermia, better or worse is the trend in temperature, shivering, and mental status. Check the skin under the heat source too. Thanks for watching Module 5 of the TCCC-Plus course, Day 2, Hypothermia. Next up is Module 6, Respiration.